Hi, this is Gail Sokol. On today's show, we're going to be talking about egg foams.
Welcome to Baking Radio. Learn the art and science of baking with author, educator, and award-winning chef, Gail Sokol. Whether you've been baking your whole life or you're brand new to the world of baking and you're looking to build your confidence and learn new skills in the kitchen, you're in the right place. This is Baking Radio.
So the theme for today is egg foams, and it's sort of cool what you can do with an egg foam. And let's talk about what an egg foam actually is. An egg foam is eggs that are beaten with sugar, usually granulated sugar, and most of the time it's the white of the egg only that's foaming. So eggs have this incredible ability to hold air, and that air gets trapped within the proteins of that egg white, which form this foam. The foam then expands, so you put it in the oven, it expands when it's heated, and it helps your baked good to rise, which is amazing. That's a very cool thing to have the ability. So the egg white is really a superhero when it comes to making egg foams. There are 3 types of egg foams, and let's talk about each one individually. So let's say you enjoy lemon meringue pie. Lemon meringue pie usually is a crust with a lemon filling and a meringue topping, which is an egg foam. Meringue is an egg foam. And this is known as a French or common meringue, and that's the type that's on top of a lemon meringue pie, a very simple or French or common meringue. So this is a 1-to-1 ratio of egg whites to granulated sugar. The egg whites are placed into an electric mixer. Some people like to do this by hand. They want to flex their muscles and they love to beat by hand. And you can foam an egg by hand with a whisk. That's the perfect job for a whisk in a large bowl, and you can easily do it. The egg whites are beaten with the granulated sugar. So you would take your whip attachment of your electric mixer, and that's the attachment that looks like a giant whisk, and you would attach that, and you would make sure your egg whites have no fat in them, and you would make sure there is no yolk in the whites. The other thing you would need to make sure of that the bowl is clean and dry, and that's very important when you want to foam eggs. And I'll tell you a few other things that you need to get the perfect egg foam later on. So as you're beating these egg whites, you don't add your sugar right away. You just beat the egg whites. Very often you may see a little bit of cream of tartar put in there, tiny little amount, like a 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar. And we've all heard of cream of tartar. It's an acid, it's an acidic ingredient. It's sort of a byproduct of the wine industry, actually. And what it does is it denatures or sort of breaks down these proteins in the egg whites and allows more air to go in them. So it's very interesting to see what an egg looks like. So let's delve into an egg white. Let's just do it. Let's pretend we are very, very tiny and we are looking through an electron microscope at a strand of protein. What does it look like? And remember, egg whites are pure protein. So a strand of protein that is not heated or beaten looks like a piece of curly hair, sort of like a pig's tail, very coiled and corkscrew-like. And as you beat it or heat it, it slowly unwinds and becomes a little straighter. And it can hold moisture in between all the protein strands. They sort of almost like you're making paper cutouts of dolls that are held together by their hands, and there's a little space in between them. That space would fill with air or moisture, and that's how your egg whites hold air and get beaten and get this thickness about them, this viscosity about them. So these egg whites are beaten. The strands of protein denature, and that's what that means when they unwind a bit, and they can hold this moisture, and air in between them. So that first type, the French or common meringue, that's all it is. You're taking these egg whites, you're putting maybe a little bit of cream of tartar. Sometimes a little bit of lemon juice would be used if you don't have cream of tartar. But cream of tartar is usually the acid of choice. And then once you get a foaming going, and you'll see when you get it, it only takes about a minute on medium speed, you would go to a higher speed and start adding your sugar 1 tablespoon at a time, very slowly, in other words. So do you have to measure 1 tablespoon at a time? No, but just put in a little bit at a time and gradually allow that sugar to absorb. And then gradually add a little more and a little more. And then you're going to go to full speed, the highest speed your beater can do. And this is what the highest speed of any electric mixer is for. It's for egg foams. This is its job, is to form the most air that we can force into these egg whites. And this is what's going to leaven our baked good, whatever we make. And in our case, if we talk about our lemon meringue pie, we're just using it to make this foaming, beautiful topping to this pie so that we can put it in the oven, and you put it under the broiler usually, and you get this beautiful caramelization, which is caused by the sugar. And you have this beautiful, yummy, marshmallowy topping. So that's the first type of an egg foam, the French or common meringue. The second type is known as the Swiss meringue. So this is where the egg whites are not just beaten, but this is sort of cool. The egg whites are warmed first. They're actually warmed up over a double boiler, and then they're beaten. All right, so let's back up. What's a double boiler? You take a pot, and a pot where a bowl can sort of fit over that pot and not touch the bottom of the pot. And you fill that bottom pot or saucepan about 1 inch of water, 1.5 inches with water, and you bring it to a simmer. You take it off the heat, and you put your bowl with your egg whites in it. And at this point, sometimes I use my electric mixing bowl, and I make sure that fits into my pot without touching the bottom. So I don't have to pour my egg whites into the electric mixing bowl. It's already in there. They've been warmed up, and then I start beating them. The heat of under the from the water, because the water, you remember, you don't want direct heat with your eggs over your eggs. So you want the water to get hot, and that hot water will heat up the bowl, which will in turn warm up your eggs. And as you add sugar to this mixture, you're not going to do it with the whip attachment. You're just going to do it with a whisk over the stove. So you've got your electric mixing bowl in this pot of hot water with a whisk in your egg whites, and you're just going to whisk it, and it will form a thick liquid where the sugar actually dissolves. So your granulated sugar dissolves. By dissolving, this thick liquid surrounds and protects each air bubble that forms through the foaming process, right? When you beat your egg whites. And then you take this bowl with this dissolved sugar and warmed egg whites, and you actually put it on the motor portion of your electric mixer. And then you go to town and you beat it on high speed, and you take the whisk out and put your whip attachment on, and that will become the fluffiest meringue that you can find. And this particular egg foam is more stable than the French or common meringue. So if you leave a French or common meringue, remember there's no cooking involved there, right? If you leave it alone and just let it sit there for several hours, it would slowly, the air would escape and the eggs would go back to their original shape, which is a liquid. That's why sometimes, have you ever eaten a lemon meringue pie and you see this weeping? They call it weeping, actually. It's not like the egg whites are crying or anything, but there's a little bit of moisture around them because they're losing moisture. The moisture is coming out of the egg whites. It's going back to its original shape, its original viscosity, which is thin. So here, when you're making the Swiss meringue, you are basically denaturing the proteins. You're unwinding them like we talked about before, making them less curly, those protein strands, and creating a more stable meringue. So if you left that, it's not going to weep as much. Now, our third and most stable meringue was one that I just said by accident. It's called the Italian meringue. And this is where you actually make a boiling sugar syrup. You actually take sugar and water, you bring it to a boil, and you put egg whites, no yolk, remember, egg whites in your electric mixing bowl. And on high speed, you beat your egg whites till they're nice and foamy. And then you slowly put in this boiling sugar syrup on high speed. And that exaggerates what the Swiss meringue does. It actually cooks the proteins in the egg. And as they cook, they unwind those protein strands. They get straight. Like we talked about, they get straighter. And they hold moisture in between them and air inside. And you have the most stable of those three meringues is that Italian meringue. And cookies can be made of those, meringue cookies. And sometimes frostings. And even marshmallow. Yeah, you can make homemade marshmallow. Isn't that cool? And they use egg foams, all from egg foams. So the one thing I want to go over with you is the tips on how to create the highest quality egg foam. First of all, your eggs, and I don't think I said this before, your eggs, when you separate them, so you have just your whites, they must be at room temperature. They can't be cold. They will not beat up to their fullest volume if they're cold, because there's a natural surface tension to egg whites, and you will be able to break through it if they become room temperature. And your mixer will be able to break through and allow them to have more air be held in between those protein strands. Number two, the bowl. Anything you put your egg whites in must be clean and dry. Not 1 ounce of leftover frosting from another recipe. That electric mixing bowl or whatever bowl you put them in must be clean and thoroughly cleaned and dry. So not even a little bit of water. Water's not going to hurt a meringue per se, but it can dilute it, and it can also weaken it so it doesn't last as long. And third, no yolks, okay? And I know I've repeated myself, you don't want any yolks in that egg foam. And there are some cakes, I have to be fair, that are called whole egg sponge cakes that use the entire egg, and they can create an egg foam with the yolk added. And those are cakes specifically known as genoise, which is a French sponge cake. And that's a different type of a recipe that uses whole eggs. So there you have how to make the 3 different types of egg foams. And what are egg foams used for? Sponge cakes, angel food cakes, which are sponge cakes, meringues, frostings. Meringues can be made not only as a topping to lemon meringue pie, but they can also be used and baked in cookies. You can pipe them out and make cookies with them because they will dry out in the oven and create these crispy, yummy meringue cookies. And I mentioned marshmallows and even frostings for cakes. There's something called mountain frosting, which is a sort of an old-fashioned frosting that does use an egg foam. So today we've learned how to make egg foams, how to make the highest quality egg foams, and the 3 different types of egg foams. Be sure to go to bakingradio.com, and if you have any questions about eggs, egg foams, leave me a message. I would love to answer some of your questions on air. Next week's show, we're going to be discussing stovetop custards that are made without a starch.